What happened on Jimmy Kimmel Live that night was something no one saw coming. Vance walked onto that stage expecting an interview, but what he got was something entirely different. A setup, a media ambush, or just another example of how late-night TV has become a battlefield for political narratives. Whatever it was, it all led to one shocking moment. Vance stood up, walked off, and left the entire audience stunned. But here's the real question. Did he just make a critical mistake, or was this a genius move that flipped the script on Kimmel himself? And let's be clear, this wasn't just another awkward late-night exchange. This moment exploded across the internet, igniting debates on both sides. Some called JD weak for walking away. Others saw it as a masterstroke, a refusal to play along with a one-sided game. But no matter where you stand, one thing is undeniable. This changed everything. Did JD expose the true nature of late-night comedy? Did Kimmel push too far? And most importantly, what does this mean for the future of political figures stepping into these media traps? Tonight, we break it all down. From the subtle tactics used in late-night interviews to the power dynamics at play, this is a story that goes way deeper than what happened on stage. And if you think you already know the full story, trust me, there's more. So before we dive in, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because what we're about to uncover might just change the way you see these interviews forever. Let's get into it. Late-night shows have always walked a fine line between entertainment and political commentary. But at what point does comedy cross the line into a calculated ambush? That's the real question after Vance's tense appearance on Jimmy Kimmel Live. What started as a routine interview quickly spiraled into something much more heated, leaving the audience wondering, was this about laughs? Or was there a deeper agenda at play? Late-night hosts often claim neutrality, but when political guests are on the couch, the gloves seem to come off. Was Kimmel simply doing his job, or was this a strategic takedown disguised as comedy? Vance isn't the first political figure to face a grilling under the bright lights of late-night TV, but his encounter with Kimmel felt different. The back and forth between them wasn't just playful banter, it was sharp, calculated, and at times unrelenting. When does humor become a weapon rather than just a punchline? While comedians often argue that their jabs are harmless, the reality is that these late-night segments shape public perception. And let's be honest, when a guest's ideology clashes with the host's, the comedy tends to lean in one direction. Was this an even playing field, or was Vance set up to fail from the moment he walked on stage? This isn't the first time a conservative figure has walked into what some might call a media trap. Time and time again, we've seen guests caught in a dynamic where their words are twisted, their reactions scrutinized, and their credibility tested, all under the guise of entertainment. But is that really fair? The audience comes for laughs, not partisan warfare. When a guest's political stance becomes the punchline, does the show still serve its original purpose, or has late-night TV turned into something entirely different? An ideological battleground where certain viewpoints are ridiculed while others are celebrated. But let's flip the script. For a moment, what if Vance had been from the other side of the political aisle? Would the tone of the conversation have been different? Would Kimmel have softened his approach, or was this level of interrogation inevitable? These questions matter because they reveal an underlying reality. Late-night shows are no longer just about humor. They are platforms where narratives are shaped, audiences are influenced, and political discourse is molded, often under the pretense of lighthearted fun. And then came the breaking point. Vance didn't just sit there and take it. He made a choice that no one saw coming. In a move that left the audience stunned, he walked off the stage, refusing to participate in what he clearly saw as an unfair setup. But was that the right decision? Did he outplay Kimmel by flipping the power dynamic, or did he give his critics exactly what they wanted, a dramatic exit that could be spun as a sign of weakness? One thing's for sure, this moment didn't end when Vance walked out. It was only just beginning. If there's one thing Vance proved during his tense showdown with Jimmy Kimmel, it's that he doesn't rattle easily. The way he handled the relentless jabs, the subtle digs, and the thinly veiled sarcasm, that takes control. Most people in his position would have either snapped back or fumbled under pressure, but not JD. He stayed calm, unwavering, and fully aware of what was happening. While Kimmel threw punchlines, JD responded with poise, never giving in to the bait. And that, right there, is what changed everything. Because when a guest doesn't react the way the host expects, the entire game shifts. Kimmel tried, he really did, to push JD into a corner, expecting an outburst or at least a flustered reaction. But JD never took the bait. Instead, he methodically dismantled the narrative being crafted against him. He didn't yell. He didn't lose his cool. He simply pointed out the flaws in Kimmel's framing and let the audience connect the dots. And let's be real, there's nothing late-night hosts hate more than a guest who refuses to play into their setup. JD's composed demeanor didn't just protect him from embarrassment, it exposed the entire playbook. The moment JD stood up and decided to leave, the power dynamic flipped. Kimmel, used to having the final word, suddenly found himself on the back foot. Because what's more impactful, a politician arguing back and forth, or one who silently walks away, refusing to participate in the spectacle? JD's exit wasn't just about leaving the interview, it was a calculated move that spoke louder than words. He wasn't running, he wasn't retreating, he was sending a message, I won't be your punchline. And just like that, Kimmel lost control of the moment. But let's not forget, the real battle wasn't happening in the studio. It was happening online. Within hours, the internet was ablaze with reactions. JD's supporters praised his confidence, calling his walkout a masterclass in self-respect. Critics, of course, had their own take, claiming he couldn't handle the heat. But regardless of which side you're on, one thing is undeniable. JD made people talk, and in the age of viral media, that's a victory in itself. After all, what's more powerful, winning an argument in the moment or shaping the entire conversation after the fact? So, did JD Vance just change the game for politicians on late-night TV? Was his move a sign of strength, or did he miss an opportunity to fight? Back harder, one thing's for sure, this wasn't just another awkward celebrity interview. This was a statement, and now the question isn't about what JD did, it's about what happens next. Because this moment, it won't be forgotten anytime soon. Let's be honest, late-night TV isn't just about comedy anymore. These shows have evolved into something much bigger, platforms where narratives are built, public figures are scrutinized, and political ideologies are reinforced. Once upon a time, the goal was to entertain. Now, it's about influence. So the real question is, are late-night hosts still comedians? Or have they become political commentators with a laugh track? And if they are shaping political discourse, should they be held accountable for how they frame the conversation? Take a step back and look at the landscape. When was the last time you saw a conservative guest walk away from a late-night interview unscathed? More often than not, these interviews feel less like casual conversations and more like a battlefield where only one side is expected to win. And let's not kid ourselves, audiences aren't just tuning in for the jokes, they're watching for the message. That's why these hosts don't just poke fun at politicians, they craft narratives, subtly reinforcing which figures deserve to be mocked and which should be celebrated. But here's the kicker. These hosts are rarely challenged. They hold the mic, they control the pacing, and they dictate how the conversation unfolds. Guests are at a disadvantage the moment they sit down. And when the audience is already primed to laugh at you rather than with you, how do you even stand a chance? JD Vance's case was no exception. Kimmel wasn't just making jokes, he was steering the discussion, shaping the reaction, and ensuring that JD was playing defense from the start. And the moment JD decided to walk out, that was the one thing Kimmel didn't anticipate. But let's push this even further. If late-night hosts are going to engage in political discourse so openly, do they have a responsibility to be fair? Should they offer genuine debate rather than just roasting their guests for applause? Because here's what's at stake. When entertainment disguises itself as political discussion, it creates an echo chamber. The audience laughs, agrees, and reinforces their own beliefs without ever hearing the other side. And when that happens, are these shows really fostering conversation? Or are they just making sure one side always looks like the punchline? So what's next for conservative figures navigating this space? Do they even bother engaging with late-night TV, knowing the odds are stacked against them? Or should they rewrite the rules, forcing these hosts to either offer a real debate or expose their own biases? J.D. Vance's exit raised these questions in a way that can't be ignored. And whether you agree with his politics or not, one thing is clear. This moment wasn't just about him. It was about the bigger game being played. And now the question isn't just who is in control of the narrative, it's how long they'll be able to keep it that way. When J.D. Vance got up and left Jimmy Kimmel live, it wasn't just an impulsive decision, it was a calculated move. But was it the right one? Walking out made a statement, no doubt. It put him in control of the moment and denied Kimmel the satisfaction of a drawn-out argument. But on the flip side, did he miss an opportunity to push back harder and turn the tables in real time? Because let's face it, late-night TV is a battlefield, and staying in the fight can sometimes be just as powerful as walking away. Think about it. If JD had stayed, could he have exposed Kimmel's tactics even more? Could he have turned the ambush around, putting Kimmel on the defensive instead? There's something to be said for standing your ground, especially in an environment where the audience is already primed to react against you. And history shows that some of the most memorable political moments have come from direct confrontations, not exits. So, did JD miss an opportunity, or did he play the long game by letting the internet carry his message instead? Let's look at past walkouts. Politicians and public figures have done it before, sometimes to great effect, sometimes to their detriment. Think of moments where guests have stormed off news sets, abandoned debates, or refused to engage in hostile interviews. In some cases, the move has been seen as a show of strength. In others, it's been spun as an inability to handle pressure. So how will JD's moment be remembered? Will it be seen as a power move or a retreat? That depends on who is telling the story, and that's where the media comes in. In today's hyper-partisan landscape, every move a public figure makes is analyzed, dissected, and reframed to fit a narrative. JD's walkout wasn't just a personal decision, it became ammunition for both sides. His supporters called it an act of defiance, proof that he wouldn't be part of a one-sided spectacle. His critics, however, painted it as a sign of weakness, arguing that a true leader would have stayed and fought back. The irony? If he had stayed, those same critics would have likely accused him of being combative. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. So, what's the takeaway here? Should politicians facing media bias adopt JD's strategy, or is it better to stand and push back? The answer isn't simple, but one thing is clear. Every media appearance is a chess game, and J.D. Vance just made a move that no one saw coming. The question now is, will others follow his lead, or will they take a different approach the next time they step onto a late-night stage? In today's digital age, a single moment can redefine a politician's entire public image. And J.D. Vance's walkout? It was tailor-made for virality. The second he left the stage, the internet took over. Clips flooded social media, commentators dissected every angle, and the debate erupted across platforms. But here's the real question. Was J.D. Vance the victim of a media setup, or did he outplay Kimmel by turning the moment into something bigger than just a late-night interview? Because make no mistake, this wasn't just about what happened in that studio. It was about how the world reacted to it. Within hours, the video spread like wildfire. Conservative commentators hailed J.D. as a symbol of resilience, someone who refused to be used as a punchline. On the other side, late-night loyalists claimed he had crumbled under pressure, but no matter which side you were on, one thing was undeniable: the moment mattered. Because in the era of short attention spans and instant reactions, what sticks isn't the full interview, it's the clip, the soundbite, the one action that people can latch onto, argue over and share. And J.D. Vance delivered that moment. This isn't the first time a viral political moment has shifted the narrative. Think about past debates, explosive interview walkouts, or even offhand remarks that turned into national talking points. One carefully timed phrase or action can hijack an entire news cycle. And when that happens, who controls the story? The late-night host who orchestrated the ambush, or the politician who refused to play along? J.D.'s move ensured that his reaction, not Kimmel's jokes, became the center of discussion. And in a media war, controlling the narrative is everything. But let's not forget the deeper impact of these viral moments. Social media doesn't just amplify events, it reshapes them. People don't just watch these clips, they remix them, add commentary, and push their own spin. Within minutes, J.D.'s exit was turned into a meme, a rallying cry, and, depending on your perspective, either a legendary moment of defiance or a strategic misstep. And here's where things get interesting. The more people debated the moment, the more power it gained. Whether people loved or hated what J.D. did, they kept talking about it. And that's the ultimate win in politics. So what's the takeaway here? In the old days, politicians relied on traditional media to get their message across. Now, one viral clip can define their image overnight. J.D. Vance understood this. He didn't just walk off a set, he created a moment. And whether it was intentional or not, it worked. The only question left is, what happens next? Because if this proves anything, it's that the battle for influence isn't won in interviews. It's won in how those interviews are remembered. For decades, comedians have wielded humor as a tool to critique politicians. But in today's media landscape, the balance of power has shifted. Late-night hosts don't just poke fun at public figures anymore. They shape narratives, frame discussions, and influence public perception. So the real question is, when does comedy stop being just comedy and start being a political weapon? Because when J.D. Vance sat down with Jimmy Kimmel, it wasn't just for laughs. It was a strategic battle. Whether he realized it or not. Think about it. Comedians have a unique shield. They can say almost anything under the guise of humor. If a joke lands, the audience laughs. If it doesn't, they can dismiss it as just a bit. But politicians don't have that luxury. Every word they say is scrutinized, every reaction analyzed. That's why moments like J.D. Vance's walkout are so significant. Did Kimmel underestimate how much power J.D. had in that moment? Because while Kimmel had control of the stage, J.D. had control of his response. And that's where the dynamic shifted. But let's take it a step further. If comedians are going to engage in political discourse, should they be held accountable for how they frame their jokes? When does humor cross the line from satire to outright propaganda? It's one thing to make fun of public figures. It's another to systematically create an environment where one side is always the target. And let's not ignore the audience's role in all of this. Are they genuinely laughing at a joke, or are they responding to who the joke is aimed at? Because if the punchline is always the same, maybe it's not just comedy anymore. Maybe it's something much bigger. J.D. Vance's walkout challenged this entire power structure. He didn't stay, he didn't argue. He simply left, refusing to play into the routine. And suddenly, Kimmel wasn't the one controlling the conversation. JD was. Because at the end of the day, power in media isn't about who talks the most. It's about who leaves the biggest impact. And sometimes, the most powerful move isn't saying something clever. It's walking away and letting the world do the talking for you. So what happens now? Will other politicians follow JD's lead, refusing to be part of a one-sided game? Or will they take the fight directly to these comedians, exposing the cracks in the so-called harmless jokes? One thing is for sure, this moment was bigger than just JD Vance and Jimmy Kimmel. It was a wake-up call. And whether late-night hosts admit it or not, the game just changed. The moment JD Vance walked off Jimmy Kimmel Live, the energy in the room shifted. Some audience members laughed nervously, others gasped, and a few sat there in stunned silence. But here's what's really interesting. Those reactions weren't just about what happened on stage. They were a reflection of something much bigger. The deep political divide that now defines entertainment. Late-night TV isn't just comedy anymore, it's a cultural battleground. And JD's exit, it forced people to pick a side. Think about it. The audience at a show like Kimmel's is primed to react in a certain way. They're there to laugh, to cheer, to see their favorite host take playful jabs at public figures. But when the dynamic suddenly shifts, when a guest refuses to be the punchline, it creates discomfort. That's exactly what happened the night JD walked out. You could feel the tension, the hesitation, because for the first time, the script wasn't being followed. And that's not something late-night audiences are used to. Now take a look at how different demographics reacted outside the studio. On social media, the split was immediate. JD's supporters hailed his move as a bold stand against media bias. His critics framed it as a sign of weakness. But here's the catch. Everyone was talking about it. And in today's media landscape, that's what really matters. The biggest impact doesn't come from a live audience's laughter. It comes from the way an event is dissected, debated and shared online. And JD's walkout, it was a viral moment tailor-made for that kind of reaction. But this isn't just about one politician or one late-night show. This moment highlights a bigger trend. Entertainment and politics are now inseparable. Audiences don't just watch to laugh, they watch to see their beliefs reinforced. And that creates a dangerous feedback loop. If late-night viewers expect every conservative guest to be the butt of the joke, and every liberal figure to be treated with kid gloves, then what's really being accomplished? Is it still comedy, or has it become something else entirely? So what does this mean for future political guests? Should conservatives even bother appearing on shows where the audience is stacked against them? Or should they go in knowing the deck is rigged and prepare to flip the script? JD Vance's moment forced late-night audiences to confront their own biases, whether they liked it or not. And that's a shift that could have ripple effects far beyond just one interview. Because if politicians start refusing to play along, what happens to the late-night formula? And more importantly, who really holds the power in that exchange? JD Vance's walkout didn't just shake up Jimmy Kimmel Live. It sent a message to every political figure thinking about stepping onto a late-night stage. The question now is, should conservatives even bother appearing on these shows anymore? Because let's be real, late-night TV isn't neutral territory. It's an environment where certain guests are welcomed, while others are placed under a magnifying glass. So, if the deck is stacked against them from the start, what's the right strategy? Engage in a rigged debate, or do what JD did, flip the script entirely. One thing is clear, preparation is everything. Politicians who step onto these stages need to understand that they're not just walking into an interview, they're entering a controlled narrative. The host has home court advantage. The audience is primed to react a certain way, and the editing, it can frame a guest however the producers want. That means anyone willing to take that risk needs to own the moment from the very start. Stay composed, stay on message, and most importantly, don't play into the host's setup, because once they get you defensive, they've already won. But let's consider another angle. Should conservatives start avoiding these shows altogether? JD's walkout was a strong statement, but does it set a precedent where political figures on the right simply refuse to engage? There's a real argument to be made here. If every late-night interview is a potential ambush, why give the host the satisfaction? Why walk into a media trap that's designed for you to fail? Maybe it's time to force the conversation onto different platforms, where the playing field is at least somewhat balanced. Then again, there's another school of thought, one that says lean in, use the bias against itself. Some politicians have mastered the art of flipping the dynamic, turning these interviews into unexpected victories. Think of moments where guests have called out the host in real time, exposing the setup and forcing the audience to question what they're seeing. It's a risky move, but when executed correctly, it can turn the ambush back on the attacker, and in today's media landscape, that's a power play worth considering. So, what happens next? Will JD's decision to walk out discourage other conservative figures from taking the late-night stage? Or will it inspire a new approach, one that forces these hosts to either engage fairly or risk losing their own credibility? One thing's for sure. After this moment, politicians can't afford to be naive about the media game. The rules have changed. The question now is, who's willing to play by their own rules? So now the question is, who really won this showdown? JD Vance walked off Jimmy Kimmel Live, but was it a power move or a missed opportunity? Did he dodge a media trap? Or did he leave too soon? One thing's for sure, this moment didn't stay in the studio. It spread like wildfire, igniting debates across social media, news platforms, and political circles. Some see JD as a fighter who refused to be the butt of a joke. Others claim he ran from the challenge. But what do you think? Was JD Vance right to walk away, or should he have stayed and fought back? And more importantly, what does this mean for the future of political guests on late-night TV? Is this the beginning of a shift where conservatives refuse to play into biased media narratives? Or will politicians start approaching these shows differently, ready to flip the script instead of being caught in a setup? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because trust me, this conversation is far from over. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a deep dive into moments like this. And if you think this story was intense, wait until you see what we're covering next. Click here for the next video, because the revelations aren't stopping anytime soon. See you there.